What's the dumbest reason you've ever been fired from a job? Catching the boss's mistakes. Years ago I worked at a cabinet shop. The owner used a computer CAD program specifically designed for cabinetry. About 20% of his drawings contained costly mistakes. I was constantly going back and forth to his office clarifying and correcting. It got to the point that he would get jittery every time I went to talk to him. Finally one day his wife fired me for correcting his mistakes too much and making him feel bad. Her exact words: "Fragile ego." Because I refused to drop out of high school so I could work overnights for minimum wage. This shit is surprisingly not too uncommon. I applied to a Babies R Us when they still existed, and the manager wanted me to work 12-hour night shifts that lead into 10 AM. When I told them I was still in school, they asked if I could just cut CL button those days. It's been decades, so I forget if it would have overlapped or not. I just know I needed to sleep sometime. Guy who worked at a place I used to work at got fired for being hospitalized on a day he was supposed to work. He got told to find someone to take his shift, and if he couldn't, he wouldn't have a job. This was in the medical field. I was 15 and was hired to make sandwiches. First day on the job they handed me a giant cup to wear outside in the Texas heat with a giant fan between my legs that inflated the suit. The whole thing smelled like balls. They told me just to dance and try to bring customers in. I was a 15-year-old kid with no dance experience, so I just started doing humping motions. I got fired for being a sexual cup. Okay, that's funny. Working in assembly, we had to initial off on our work. Someone had the same initials as me and did shoddy work. They didn't like me anyways, so when I was being fired and they showed me the sign-offs, I pointed out that those initials weren't my handwriting. They just said "oh well" and went forward with the termination. My twin brother and I used to work for the same company. My twin got into an altercation with a client, and although the matter was resolved, that client had enough clout with the manager that he demanded my twin be let go. And because we were twins and happened to look enough alike, I was also let go. Damn. That sucks to hear. Maybe move to Europe. There are laws against things like that in the first world. Ha. Good luck. The first world Europe has incredibly tough immigration standards. We hired you about 2 years too early and aren't ready for upper management yet. 6 months after paying for me and my family to relocate across the country, I got hit with something similar. Relocated across the country to a specific site because the program said I needed to be at that site. There was nothing for me to do at the site. I was let go for not doing anything. Like maybe make sure you need to hire someone before you hire them. The cuts came from a poor quarterly performance, so I didn't take it super personally. Even more alarming is that I was one of 8 people let go at a site of 70 something. I had been there 6 months, so made sense to cut me. But geez, what kind of fucked management is that? The kind where someone who didn't like you got you to move far away from them before depriving you of your income. My till would always come up short every time the shift manager would count it. Keep in mind, they did it without us there. It was shady, but I was 16 at the time and didn't know better. Anyway, they kept saying that if my register kept coming up short, they'd fire me, which is exactly what happened when the till came up $20 short, which blew my mind because I was keeping it as accurate as humanly possible my whole shift. About a year later, I found out that the shift manager had been caught stealing from people's tills and was terminated. Wow, what scum. I dropped a rock. Technically almost fired, but only almost by pure luck. One summer during college I was working at a construction site as basic labor building a couple apartment buildings. Like fancy 5-story ones on the waterfront. One was almost done, so for that one we were just doing stuff like installing appliances or doors and doing landscaping. This site was very poorly run. Mainly because the project manager, we'll call him Ted, was useless and made a lot of mistakes and poor decisions from the top that wasted a lot of time. Plus pretty much no one respected him, which led to its own set of problems. The project was millions of dollars over budget and months behind schedule at the point when I started. One day, one of the elevators in the almost done building was being inspected. You'll be happy to learn that elevator inspectors are extremely fastidious. 2. Much dust at the bottom of the shaft. Fail. A drop screw within 20 feet of the elevator on any floor. Fail. Anyway, the elevator apparently failed. Ted of course was not in a very good mood, and like any good leader was trying to find any way to blame his subordinates. Meanwhile, I was outside with a few other laborers doing some landscaping work. We had slightly overfilled a wheelbarrow with like big decorative rocks, and when I went to pick it up one of them slid out and loudly crashed on the pavement. Ted happened to be walking out of a door nearby at this moment and comes storming over and yells, "That's it. You're done." I'm pretty stunned and go, "UHH what? You mean fired?" He goes, "Yes. Fired. This lack of care in our work is exactly what's wrong with this project." This guy knew me by sight only. Had no clue if I was a good worker or not. I stand silently for a second and then think, what the hell? I was about to unload on this guy and tell him exactly what me and everyone else on the side thought of him and spell out in no uncertain terms what was wrong with the project. Thankfully the superintendent, who did actually work with me and knew that I worked hard and generally did a good job, happened to overhear what was going on and talk him down. So I didn't get fired. Also, the son of the owner of the contracting company worked with me doing the same job. Dad was grooming him to take over the business and thought the kid should know what it was like to be on the bottom of the totem pole. Good for him. Close bracket. He mentioned what had happened with Ted, and I guess Ted got his butt handed to him in regard to why the project really was struggling, and was no longer allowed to fire any low-level people without the superintendent's approval or higher-level ones without his approval. That's crazy. What a douche. He sucked. Had her a week or two after I quit. I was in a little traffic, literally on the way to the airport to go back to college. And what do I see causing the traffic but a familiar Brodozer Outram, because of course he drove the douchiest vehicle possible that had rear-ended a delivery truck. Karma comes through sometimes. One of my coworkers fell asleep while driving a company truck back at the end of the day. Totaled the truck, but no serious injuries. Boss overhears from someone else that I didn't get much sleep one night a couple of weeks back. I was told he couldn't risk having a repeat episode, and I was let go. Dude who wrecked the truck kept his job. Luckily, was offered my job back within a week. I wasn't fired, but I got a final written warning after being promoted to a managerial position and being sent to a different location, because they won't allow you to be at the same storefront once promoted to give you a different experience. And once I transferred to the new store, I started working a whole lot more with training and such. At this new store though, we were overstaffed, and the older store was understaffed after the transfer, and they asked if I could actually help cover some shifts. So I would open at one store, leave halfway through the day, and go close at the other store. Both general managers were okay with this, and it went on for 3 weeks. After those 3 weeks I was transferred another time to a third store, and this was because of the second store being overstaffed. I met my GM at the third store twice. Once for him to introduce himself to me, where he said hello, name, I'll see you around, and I worked with the assistant manager of the store. I told him about what I was doing, and he said yeah, that's cool, and he said he ran it by the grams. After 2 more weeks of seeing me work every day at both stores, which was roughly anywhere from 5 AM to 11 PM, I got called into the office by the GM of the third store. My second interaction ever with him was for a final written warning, because I had worked over 30 days in a row without an off day, and that he didn't like that I was working at the store I was originally hired at, and told me he talked to my original GM about the situation and told him it was bullshit I was working over there still, and that he forbidden me from working at any other store unless I get it signed off from him. He said he is giving me a written warning for insubordination and treason. Actual decking treason, because I was going behind his back and working at another storefront, even though I was leading in sales at both places by a far margin as well, and that he was my GM and going to any other store without his permission would result in my termination. I refused to sign the write-up and said that's fine. I requested a transfer and to step down from the managerial position to go back to my original store with my original GM, because I refused to work with someone like that. I ended up quitting a couple months later due to needing a surgery from a work injury that just made it harder to do my job, and I genuinely loved every minute of it. It was my first job. Subsequently though, both of those GMs would be terminated before I quit, both due to some sketchy stuff. Thought it was funny though, in my permanent record there I had a final written warning for insubordination and treason. I broke a tooth while eating lunch in the LOL cafeteria. It hurt so bad. Asked to leave for the day to go to the dentist. I was denied, so I left anyway. Fired an hour later. I guess that's not really dumb, but more fucked up than anything. People getting fired because they need to get an injury sorted out pisses me off. Like they think people will just go to work with that injury still there. I'm a programmer and have been for 20 years. Full lamp stack. I moved back home, a small town in rural nowhere, and got a job as a receptionist. I got fired after the first week because the owner didn't like how I was with the computers. Overqualified, I guess. I got fired from goodwill because my boss forgot that he gave me the day off to take care of my varying stuff. Said I was a no-call no-show and fired me the following day. I tried to tell him what happened, but he didn't believe me. His assistant manager even sided with me and showed him where he wrote it down in his own damn handwriting. Nope, never happened. I must have forged it, he said to me. He literally told you that you must forge the note. Yes. He was probably as smart as the boss from the movie Waiting. Refusing to arrange items and boxes on high shelves. I'm short. I could barely even reach the shelves while on a ladder. I also didn't have health insurance at that job. First and last time I did put the items up there, they have all fallen on me simply because I was unable to balance them properly with how short I was. Luckily I suffered only minor bruises. The manager hated me. I worked my butt off. Came in every time there was a call off. Got along with everyone. She let me go because there wasn't enough hours to go around. She fired me over teenagers that left the place trashed and called off constantly. Been there. I've always taken my job seriously, but I'm not the most charismatic person and people often mistake that for a lack of enthusiasm/motivation. So when I first started some 12 years ago, my supervisor was always on my back looking for the tiniest mistakes that they could go and exaggerate to the directors. Stupid stuff like getting the eater of a ship wrong. It wasn't wrong when I looked it up. It just changed being, you know, an estimate. They nearly got me fired at least twice. Meanwhile since then I've seen loads people stick around for years making much more serious mistakes simply because a supervisor could have a laugh with them. On the positive side, I'm now great at keeping records of what I've done, where and when info came from, etc. Which not only covers me, but it's a lot easier to look things up. On the negative, I'm almost pathological about it. But when I was 16 I was hired at a store. The site was owned by a husband and wife. The wife hired me. On my third shift I went in, and the husband was there, so I introduced myself. Then he said, "Why did you do to your hair?" And I said nothing. My hair was purple, and had been for months. He then stormed out and brought his wife in. She told me I had to go home. Later that day I was told that if I wanted to keep my job I would have to dye my hair a normal color. I said I'll pick up my check on Friday. So basically I got fired for having purple hair. Even though they knew my hair was purple when they hired me. Damn stigmas. Got fired because a customer complained about me for some bullshit reason. Turned out the customer was the manager's friend. Thankfully I got re-employed after taking it to a tribunal via my union for unfair dismissal. Lost my cold calling job for calling out sick when I lost my voice. They wanted me to come sit in my cubicle. My whole job was to call people on the phone. I was sick with laryngitis and couldn't speak. Not wearing black socks. Meanwhile cooks in the back are making food without ducking gloves. But a cashier who is wearing blue socks is the big issue. I was a new hire and given uniform pants that were too long. On one of my first shifts, a manager told me I couldn't work until I had them hemmed. I don't sew, so I would have to make arrangements to have it done. The next day, that same manager called to see why I wasn't there. I reminded him of the pants thing, and he said he was going to write me up. I told him not to bother, and I brought back the uniforms and quit. Good riddance. Job sucked anyway. Oh wow. Sorry they wasted your time. I think the dumbest was being fired, because I handed my resignation. Yes, it was the "you didn't quit, you're fired. Pack your stuff and don't come back." I packed my stuff, left, and before I got home was told that I was in garden leave and had to do a handover report. Needless to say, I did work a lot on my garden and drank beer, and the handover report was quite shit. I later found out that the guy that fired me decided to tell his manager of his prowess. The company was in dire financial situation and got a massive barlicking because he could have told me I didn't have to serve my notice and as such not get paid for it. A colleague of mine also thought wise to mention that due to my previous job, I'd have more than enough money and grudge to screw them over in court to get the notice period paycheck, 4 weeks. So although it was a great lesson on how not to be a manager for me, it was pretty stupid of my manager to have done so. I said, "Who moved the trash can?" And the manager flipped his shit. Later, he fired another 4 people, leaving a grand total of 3 to run a 600-seat restaurant. The owner was somewhat displeased. Good God. Did the owner ask you back? That sounds like a recipe for disaster on its own. The owner asked us all back a few days later, but the damage was done. We all basically walked down the street that afternoon, and within several blocks, all of us had another job. Gotta love the French Quarter, it's a steady diet of crazy pills. I would like to hear the boss's version of most of these. Lol. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe for more videos.